Major breaking news. The United States Supreme Court has just given another massive victory for Donald Trump and is on the verge of issuing a huge ruling that will overturn an almost 100-year-old precedent that really was all fake news. Fake constitutional law brought to us by FDR. You're not going to want to miss not only this huge win for Donald Trump, but very soon a huge win for the U.S. Constitution. We'll break it down when we come right back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the 4 Box of Done, a proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. All right, folks, we have major breaking news here. The United States Supreme Court has just issued another huge win for President Donald Trump. You may recall the case of Rebecca Slaughter, who was the Democratic appointee to the Federal Trade Commission. She was fired. Bye-bye. Terminated. Don't let the door hit the dupe on the way out. All that good stuff. Donald Trump kicked her out the door. Bye-bye. Well, she's sued and got lower courts in the District of Columbia, surprise, surprise, in the deep state, to basically say, hey, she should get her job back. It's wrong that the president can fire a member of the Federal Trade Commission because Congress basically set this Trade Commission up as a multi-member board, in a sense, a multi-member commission that is supposed to have members from both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and basically the president is kind of stuck with these people. Well, Donald Trump says no can do, because under Article 2 of the United States Constitution, all the executive powers of the executive branch are vested in one man, the President of the United States. Donald Trump then said, guess what? I, Donald J. Trump, am the President of the United States, which means that all the powers vested in the executive, vested in the President under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution belong to me as the President. And Congress, which is a separate branch of government, and the courts, which are a separate branch of government, cannot invade the province of Article 2 of the Constitution, this Article 2 of the Constitution, and the president's powers. That is not allowed. So Congress cannot pass some sort of law that encroaches upon the powers of Article 2, the powers of the president, because that would be a federal statute trying to override the Constitution. And you cannot do that. You cannot amend the U.S. Constitution with Congress passing a statute. And many years ago, Congress set up the Federal Trade Commission. And the Federal Trade Commission had multiple commissioners from both parties. Now, Donald Trump says, no, that's wrong. I'm the president. The Federal Trade Commission is an administrative agency, effectively, that falls under the jurisdiction of the president. If the FTC goes out there and does stupid stuff, things that I disagree with, I, the president, will be blamed politically for this. But that's not right. That's not right, because I want to be responsible for everything that occurs in the executive branch. I want the benefits of it. I want the downsides of it. I want the applause when I do something right in the executive branch. And I want the jeers if something goes wrong in the executive branch. But it's simply wrong, Trump's position was in this case of Rebecca Slaughter, to have people that are totally against my agenda working within the executive branch. So to have Rebecca Slaughter here, a Democrat, working as a commissioner for the FTC, which is part of the executive branch, is BS. I'm essentially got a traitor in there. I've got someone that is against my agenda that's going to try to thwart me everywhere I turn. And that's not appropriate. Because again, under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the critical language literally says, quote, the executive power shall be vested in the president or a president of the United States of America, period. It all vests in him. Congress cannot take that as executive powers away from him by passing a statute creating a multi-person committee, a multi-person commission, a multi-person agency, and saying that, basically multiple presidents get to have a say over this. No, no, no. So what happened just now is that the U.S. Supreme Court just did two huge things in favor of the Constitution, in favor of Donald Trump. Number one, the lower court, as you remember, in the District of Columbia, said that Donald Trump lacked the legal authority to fire Rebecca Slaughter. And in part, they said that's dependent upon the existing Supreme Court precedent from the 1930s called Humphrey's Executor. Now, Humphrey's Executor is a case from, again, the 1930s that basically held that the President of the United States may not fire a member of a multi-member commission without, let's say, good cause or something. I cannot just simply fire him. If Congress says the president cannot fire a member of a multi-member commission, the president cannot fire them. Now, obviously, this is absurd because, again, as I just read you from Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, all the executive powers belong to the president. Congress cannot come along and take some of those powers away to say, you, Mr. President, have to have this administrative agency, this commission, as part of the executive branch, but you don't get to determine who runs it. We, the Congress, get to set up a structure that allows different people to run it. No can do, because that would create a fourth branch of government. As you know, Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution creates the legislative branch, the Congress. Article 2 creates the executive branch, the president. And Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution creates the courts, the Supreme Court. There is no fourth branch of government, you see, for the Federal Trade Commission, for the Federal Reserve System, for any of these kind of agencies that Congress has set up saying that the president doesn't have authority over them. There is no such thing as a fourth branch of government. And the U.S. Supreme Court, 6-3 decision, this was a 6-3 decision, came out and agreed with it because they did two things. The first thing is Chief Justice John Roberts entered an order saying that the lower court's attempt to reinstate Rebecca Slaughter to her position as a commissioner on the FTC is verboten, is not allowed, and shall not move forward. John Roberts at the Supreme Court stayed, which means stopped, the effect of the lower court order that basically said Rebecca Slaughter gets to go back onto the commission. So the Supreme Court said that Donald Trump effectively is correct. Rebecca Slaughter doesn't get her job back. Donald Trump can fire her. And just as importantly, in fact, perhaps more importantly, the U.S. Supreme Court has just granted cert in this exact same case to hear the question of whether or not that 1930 precedent of Humphrey's Executor, whether or not that Supreme Court precedent from the 1930s should be overruled and tossed in to the trash bin of history in the same way they did it back in 2022 when they tossed Roe v. Wade into the trash bin of history. Here's what the Supreme Court had to say in issuing this order. The application for a stay in Rebecca Slaughter versus Donald Trump, presented to the Chief Justice of the United States and by him referred to the Supreme Court, is granted. The July 17, 2025 order of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia is stayed. That means stopped. The application is also treated as a petition for a writ of cert before judgment, and the petition is granted. The parties are directed to brief and argue the following questions. Number 1, whether the statutory removal protections for members of the Federal Trade Commission violate the separation of powers, and if so, whether Humphrey's Executor versus the United States from 1935 should be overruled. And 2, whether a federal court may prevent a person's removal from public office either through relief at equity or at law. Oh boy, this is going to get the liberals very angry. But again, we want to bring the Constitution back to how it was originally understood by our founders. This is very important for the Second Amendment, for all of our rights. Because what we do not want, let me be very clear about this, so you understand why this is so important for the conservative movement, the libertarian movement, the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it, and Donald Trump, and the Constitution itself. There are 3 branches of government. 2 of those branches are accountable to we the people. We the people elect our congressmen. We the people elect our senators. We the people have a vote in who's the president of the United States. We obviously don't have a direct vote on who becomes judges, but the people that become judges get appointed by the elected president of the United States, and they are confirmed or not by the elected members of the United States Senate. So even the Article 3 judges who have lifetime appointments go through the process of a appointment by the president of the United States and the confirmation by the U.S. Senate. So they touch fingers with the elected, we the people representatives, if you will, when they become judges, as they go through the process. So all three branches of government in one form or another touch fingers with we the people and the democratic process, the voting process, which, as you know from the Four Boxes Diner, one of the four boxes of American liberty that this channel is named after is the ballot box, right? You have to have the four boxes of American liberty to be a full citizen, and one of those boxes is the right to vote, known as the ballot box. So again, what was going on here, of course, was that these commissioners were basically standalone appointees on the Federal Trade Commission, and there are several of these kinds of boards out there. And they're not really beholden to the current president of the United States because the current president of the United States cannot fire them. So they could be appointed to the Federal Trade Commission by, let's say, Joe Biden. And yet they're working for the Federal Trade Commission today in 2025. And who's the president? Donald Trump. So you have literally Biden appointees on these kind of multi-member commissions, such as the Federal Trade Commission, who are making decisions that have a direct impact on the executive branch and the president of the United States. But they don't work for the president of the United States. They're not beholden to the president of the United States. So if the FTC goes out there and does something stupid that is very unpopular, Donald Trump's going to be blamed. The president will be blamed. We, the people, will blame the president. But the reality is, up until now, a lot of these commissions were not beholden to the president. So they were doing things that were effectively executive branch oriented activities, but they weren't beholden to the president because the president could not hire and fire them. They were like separate. They were essentially a fourth branch of government that does not exist. So Chief Justice John Roberts and the 6 conservative justices are clearly done with this because they allowed Donald Trump to fire Rebecca Slaughter as of this moment. And they've granted cert to see if that famous case of Humphrey's executor, which said the president cannot fire people on these multi-member boards, is that still good law? And it's almost certainly going to be thrown into the trash heap of history, as well it should, because there is no basis in American law to create a fourth branch of government. And Congress has been doing this with these commissions for quite some time, and it's time for that to end. And again, the reason why we want this in the MAGA movement, the conservative movement, the libertarian movement, the Second Amendment movement, whatever you want to call it, is because we want we, the people, to make the decisions about these sorts of things. And if we elect people, we want the elected officials we elect to have a say over who these unelected bureaucrats are. Because we do not want unelected bureaucrats, such as those that people like the Rebecca Slaughters of the world, running things like the FTC. We want to be able to hold accountable those elected officials. And it's not really fair to the elected officials to hold them accountable or not hold them accountable for something that an unelected group of people on a board over which the president cannot fire. You know, how do you blame the president for some act of the commission that the president cannot control because there's a bunch of Biden appointees on there still? And that is what Donald Trump's position is. And I think the Supreme Court has pretty clearly indicated they're going to overrule Humphrey's executor and allow the president to run the executive branch. Because again, the text of the second Article 2 of the Constitution says that all of this is to be vested with the president. Now, needless to say, the 3 liberal justices of Justice Kagan, Justice Sotomayor, and Justice Brown Jackson are very unhappy with this. Here's what they have to say about this dissenting from the decision, not just to let Rebecca Slaughter get fired by Donald Trump, but also to hear the case of whether or not Humphrey's executor should be overruled this term. Here's what the liberals had to say. On top of granting cert before judgment in this case, the Supreme Court today issues a stay enabling the president to immediately discharge and without any cause a member of the Federal Trade Commission. That stay, granted on our emergency docket, is just the latest in a series. Earlier this year, the same majority by the same mechanism permitted the president to fire without cause members of the National Labor Relations Board, the Merit Systems Protection Board, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Congress, as everyone agrees, prohibited each of those presidential removals. Bing, 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 bing. Hear what I just said? Hear what the liberals just said? Quote, Congress, as everyone agrees, prohibited each of these presidential removals. That's BS, folks. Why? Because Article 2 of the Constitution gives all the executive powers to the president. So how can Congress, with a statute, somehow amend Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution and shrink the powers of the President of the United States when all the executive powers are vested in the President under the Constitution? Because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. If a congressional statute conflicts with the Constitution wins. And here you have the liberals literally saying that Congress removes certain powers from the presidency to remove these people who are running these de facto administrative agencies under the president. That is simply not allowed, even though it's been allowed since the 1930s. But this Supreme Court and Donald Trump are stepping up to fix and restore constitutional law bit by bit to a place where it never should have left. And just to prove my point further, that the left-wing 3 Supreme Court justices are unhappy that the president is going to get these authorities, which he never should have lost because of the Constitution. This proves my point. This is what they also have to say, angry that the president, Donald Trump, has this authority, which of course is inherent in the Constitution. Here's what they write. Our emergency docket should never be used as it has been this year to permit what our own precedent bars. Still more, it should not be used as it has also been to transfer, listen carefully folks, to transfer government authority from Congress to the president and thus to reshape our nation's separation of powers. They're admitting the problem. The liberals are admitting that by striking down Humphrey's executor and letting the president run the executive branch, it's changing the way business has been operated in America for decades. But the business, the operations of government were done improperly. They were done unconstitutionally. And this Supreme Court is going to step up and say that if it's part of the executive branch, the president gets to decide how it runs. That's his area. That's where he runs. And Congress can make certain decisions involving Congress. The president makes things about the presidency and the executive powers, and the courts do the same. But Congress cannot usurp the powers of the presidency with statute. And that is exactly what the Supreme Court is going to say when they overturn Humphrey's executor this year. And oh my God, are the lefties that love the deep state, that love the swamp, that love the unelected bureaucrats bossing us around, telling us the little puddle in our backyard is a lake. Guess what? They're all going to be very unhappy because those unelected bureaucrats, those swamp creatures are going to suffer a major loss. And a lot of them are going to get kicked out the door by Donald Trump. And frankly, in my view, many of them deserve it. So there you have it, folks. Huge win at the Supreme Court for Donald Trump. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you follow me on X at 4boxesdiner. Don't forget to subscribe both to YouTube and to Rumble. And I look forward to talking to all of you again real soon here at You Got It, the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.